Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wave Talkers Live. Last week, during episode number 107, we started a Winlink exercise where we said there was a very large solar storm event. It was an extremely rare occurrence, and we're 24 hours post the event. There's a variety of different impacts that have taken place. Our agency, having jurisdiction, has requested ground-proofing data from the WaveTalkers network. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to continue on with this exercise. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at, let's say if I move the mouse over to the right spot, there we go. So here's the situation. So our agency having jurisdiction, or the AHJ, is dealing with all of the information related to this incident. They're dealing with fire and EMS and police, government, hospitals, industry that's going on, schools, shelters, whatever else that's going on. And what they did is they asked our group, the WaveTalkers network, to be able to send in some ground proofing data. So that's what we did last week. We reached out to all of you, all of our operators, and we said, hey, send in a field situation report. And what we quickly learned was all of these reports that were coming in were kind of overwhelming our system as they were coming in one by one. So at the end of the exercise, we asked all of you who were watching to reach out to your own networks, your own operators, and say, hey, would they send you the reports? And today we're going to walk you through the process of sending those reports into us, being able to move the data, manage the data a little bit better. So with that, this is going to be episode number 108. My name is Chris Mattia. My amateur radio call sign is Whiskey 6 Alpha Hotel. I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, and they are David W0DHG, Dan NR6V, Scott KM6RFB, and we'll get him on screen. Here he comes. Here comes Scott. And there we are. So there's all of us. So here you go, David and Dan and Scott. All right. So let's dive into today's check-in, which is how we usually start all of our shows at this point. So if you have access to Winlink, send in a Winlink check-in. Send it to all four of our call signs. They are W0DHG, NR6V, CAM6RFB, W6AH, and our tactical address, WaveTalkers. We'll walk through that process here in just a second. Use the standard Winlink check-in form, and when you do, down in the comments section, we'd like to know how you are preparing for the next disaster, whatever that disaster happens to be. Just let us know one thing that you're doing to prepare for an possible next disaster that may be coming in. So with that, let me jump over to my Winlink station, and let's walk through that process of sending in a Winlink check-in. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go here into the top left corner of Winlink. You're going to hit the little new message button. And up in the top, you've got an option for select template. Go ahead and give that a click. And that's going to open up your template manager. This is where all of the templates that are inside of Winlink, all of the different forms, are located. What you want to do is click on the little plus sign next to standard templates. Come down to the bottom where you see general forms. Go ahead and give that a click. And at the bottom of that listing, what you're looking for is this one right here that says Winlink check-in.txt. Just go ahead and give that a double click. When you do, what it's going to do is it's going to open up in your web browser of choice on your local machine. You want to come up here to the date and time field, and you always want to click that date and time field, because what that's going to do is it's going to set the form to your computer's current date and time. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. That way your data will be sorted properly inside of Winlink. In the to field, this is where you want to list all of our call signs. They are W0DHG, NR6V, W6AH, and CAM6RFB, and you add our tactical address, WaveTalkers. You want to separate each of those with a semicolon. The from, this is going to be your call sign. The station contact name, that is going to be just your name, so you go ahead and fill that in. Any initial operators, that would be any other operators that are sitting there watching the show with you at this point. You can go ahead and list those in there. Thanks a lot for joining us. If you have anybody else watching the show with you. In the session type, this is going to be an exercise. The service, whether or not you're sending this via amateur radio or the shares network, go ahead and select that option. For the band, let us know how you're sending that traffic in, whether it be Telnet, or if you're using the internet, HF bands, VHF, and so forth. The session type, this is how you're going to tell us how you are sending that traffic in specifically. So I'm going to use the internet to send mine in. So I'll leave mine selected to Telnet. It could also be packet, PACTOR, RDOP, VARA HF, or so forth if you're sending it in via one of those methods. In the location, this is where you want to let us know the location that you're sending this in from. I'm going to go ahead and say my home QTH, but let us know the state that you're sending it in from at the very least. It'll help us sort those data. The latitude and longitude should be automatically set for you, and those are going to be set based on either the center of your grid square, or it's going to be set via a GPS if you have one connected to your station. Here's the comment section down here. This is where you want to let us know how you are preparing for the next disaster, and I'm going to say watching WaveTalkers. And then you come down to the bottom and you just hit the submit button. Once you hit the submit button, you'll get a couple of these pop-ups that's going to have information about the page. So go ahead and hit OK. You keep hitting OK until eventually what you see is that your web browser returns back to a blank screen. When you close that browser window, you'll see all of those data are now included inside of this message. You'll also note that here in the attachment section, there are a couple of attachments that are attached to this form. And this is how Winlink is sending those data. It's including the data inside of the body of the email. It's also including a XML file with the data attached to it, and it's including a TXT file. We're going to look at that in more detail later in the show. What you do is you post this to your outbox. When you do that, you'll see, yes, I know I didn't send it. You'll see that your outbox increments by 1. You'll come up here to the open session option. Make sure that you have the type of session that you want to open selected here. Then you hit open session, and then you come over here to the top. Now, I want you to pay attention just a little bit as we're doing this, because this is one of the challenges that we're going to be talking about with today's episode. When I say start and I start downloading all of these messages, the first thing that happens is Winlink goes out and it checks onto the radio message server and it says, hey, does Chris have any more messages? And it brings up a listing for me. Now, you can make this so that it's automatically done. It just pulls everything, but you don't want to do that. You actually want to set your Winlink so that it only is pulling the messages that you select. Then I'm going to say, go ahead and download the checked messages. And what it's doing is it's going to go through and it's going to batch these 5 messages at a time, and it's going to download them as they're coming in. Now, that's really important because it's having to pull all of that traffic down in groups. And if this was a real emergency, what we would want to do is you would want to go in and only have the messages that you need to download selected. You want to unselect all of the other ones. Now, one of the challenges that is created by doing this is that when you have all of those messages in your inbox, you have to go in and you have to select and deselect the ones that you don't want to download. And all of that takes time to be able to do. So what we're going to do today is we're going to walk you through some various different ways that you can be a little bit more efficient and effective at doing this. But for right now, let's jump back into the slides and let's get into today's topic a little more, which is part 2 of our Winlink exercise. And what we're really focusing on today is team data and managing all of those team data. So let me go bring this up here so I can see it. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right. What we're dealing with a lot is problems of scale. When you're dealing with just a single message, it's not so bad. But as you start scaling that problem up, as you start having more and more operators trying to send in traffic, we get into a situation where you realize very quickly one is easy, but many is a much more difficult problem to solve. Now, what am I talking about here? All right, if you're having a conversation with another person, you're exchanging information, somebody asks you a single question, you're able to give them a single answer back. The problem ends up being when that person then asks you an and this, they're asking for some other bit of information. Suddenly it's doubled the amount of information that you're having to converse with. And this really kind of breaks down when we're talking about using radio in order to transmit information. It breaks down into 3 basic problems. The first is the amount of time that each message takes in order to send back and forth. All of that time is going to limit the bandwidth. It's going to take up frequency. It's going to take up bandwidth to be able to send that message and that exchange back and forth. So if you have two exchanges, it's going to take twice as much time, and it's going to isolate that frequency that you're trying to use for twice as long. The other thing that it's going to eat up is it's going to eat up your own focus, your own ability to focus in on whatever the question, whatever the ask was, in order to be able to deal with. We like to refer to these as the limiting factors that are going to affect you as an operator or you as a leader within your organization to be able to deal with information. Now, if you've ever been on a vacation or a car ride where you have maybe a small child in the car with you and they're asking questions, whatever it is that they're doing, they're taking up some amount of your focus while you're still trying to drive, while you're still trying to do all of the other things that you need to do to operate the vehicle safely. Add a second child into that car, and they are also adding to more questions, more interactions between those two. Suddenly, your focus is starting to get divided further and further. The more people that are adding into this problem, where they're continuing to ask more and more questions, more and more things of you, the more your time, your focus, your bandwidth to be able to deal with each one ends up being like as if you were shot by 1,000 different arrows where you're trying to constantly having to split all of your time. Now, this is a real problem, and it's something within the world of the incident command system that we would start to implement, where we start to create some separation between all of the different groups, all of the different individuals, and we would have information flow in a logical path as it goes up to the one individual resource. Now, inside of ICS, we like to refer to this as the span of control and the chain of command. The span of control is typically set up so that you're never going to have more than 7, at most 8 direct reports directly to you. That gives you the ability to manage those resources a little bit more effectively and a little bit more efficiently. And the chain of command ensures that all of those data, all of that information is able to flow smoothly up the chain of command as well as information back down. The other piece that we need to talk about today is that data matters. Data matters a whole lot. And when we start really thinking about how critical information is in a disaster, in any type of incident, we need to realize that correlation does not guarantee causation. Now, what do I mean by that? So last week, we gave you all a map. We showed a map that looks like this. It's up on the left-hand side. And this was an AI-generated map that said roughly this is our exercise area as to what we're having. And we asked all of you to send in Winlink field situation reports and fill us in on some information that you had on the ground. Well, if we were just looking at the data that's coming in, if we look over here on the left-hand side, we can see that these pins that are located in yellow here, these are all data that were operators who reported that they didn't have power, for instance. When I say that correlation doesn't necessarily indicate causation, let's look at this data point right here. We do not know if the reason that this operator has reported that they don't have power is the same reason that these operators do not have power. It might be related, but it may not. We need more data to be able to really come to a clear conclusion on that. Don't jump to conclusions. As you get data into your group, as an operator, we're passing data from one level to another. We're passing it as it comes in. We're not necessarily interpreting the data to try and make any determinations. What our agencies are looking for from us a lot of times is ground-proofing data. It's an additional layer of data to add to the existing data set that they already have coming in from multiple different sources, from industry, from other government agencies. And so the ground-proofing data that we're adding is just adding an additional layer on top of that for them to really be able to prove the data that they have and verify that what's going on. In order for that data to be useful, it needs to have three different components. It needs to be accurate, and that is entirely on you and your operators to make sure that they're filling out the field situation report for the information that is presented to them. So right now, I don't have any power at my location. That is the information that I'm going to report. If I report what Johnny or Susie down the street may have, that is not as helpful of an information because that's just hearsay. We need to report just the information that we have available to us that we can verify ourselves. That data also needs to be useful. It needs to be in a format that your agency or your client is expecting, a way that they're able to interpret that data and fit it into their overall flow of the rest of the data that they have coming in from multiple sources. Remember, when from that earlier slide, it's not just us as radio operators that are participating and trying to support this incident. The agency is dealing with all of those other stakeholders, and so they have a lot of other information that's coming in from them in multiple places. They need a smooth way to be able to integrate all of it together, and it needs to be efficient. As we saw during that first check-in, all of those data coming in, all of those check-ins can tie up a lot of time. They can tie up a lot of resources on any individual machine. So we want to make the impact on the agency as little as possible. So we're able to collect the data and we're able to just package it and send it in a way that is as efficient as possible. So this brings us to Winlink. And within Winlink, we're going to talk about Winlink templates and forms. They're technically called templates, but a lot of times we'll refer to them as Winlink forms because that's what we're used to seeing. And I've got a tagline here that says there's no free lunch. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. So when we look at an individual form, the forms are created inside of Winlink in a format that ensures that the look and feel of the form and how those forms print out is exactly what the agencies are looking for. It's exactly the format that when they get a copy of this form and they open it up, it looks like the ICS forms that would be the standardized forms that they would be using. That makes it much more efficient for them to process the information and to add it into their overall systems. It's what they're looking for. It also makes it a lot easier on us as operators because we can use the same information for how to fill out a form, what goes into each field that everyone else is using. So all of our data becomes a lot cleaner when we're submitting all of those data. So the form layouts, all of what makes a form look the way that it does is all included as part of Winlink Express. Every time that you update your copy of Winlink and you update your copy of the forms, you're getting an updated copy of the latest layouts of every single one of these forms. So even if you're in a situation where you don't have access to the internet and you're just filling out the forms, if you've got a current copy of Winlink, you already have all of the official forms with you that you need to submit in to make all of your data match everyone else's data. Now, when Winlink sends a form, as we just saw with that Winlink check-in, the data is readable without a copy of Winlink. So one of the cool things about Winlink is that it allows you to send a message not just to another amateur radio operator to their call sign. You can also send that same form to, say, a shares call sign to an operator that's operating under the shares network. You can also send that form to an operator who is just a regular email address. So maybe you're sending it to a particular group of people or an individual person who's going to pull those data and they don't have a copy of Winlink. You can still send that data and all of it you can see is right in the body of that message. Now, when Winlink sends the form data, and we just kind of looked at this a little bit, it actually sends 3 copies of the data embedded in the message. The first copy is the plain text body of the message itself. And we just saw that. That data is typically about 2 to 4 kilobytes in size when you add up all of the space that it takes to be able to send that data. We also saw that it attaches a file that says formdata.txt, and that's, again, about another 2 to 4 kilobytes of size that's going into that Winlink message. And what that allows an operator to do when they receive that message is if they're not using Winlink, they can actually just pull that attachment out and they can import it into their own system as a text file that might be delimited in some kind of way. So a data manager would be able to use that data. The next file that gets attached is one that's called, it ends up with the formdata.xml. And this is the same data, but it has a bunch of tags associated with it. And those tags and that data is what Winlink is using to import that message directly into your browser, display it in the form, so we're able to work with these data ourselves. And it looks like the form that we're expecting. By opening up that form data using the display information that's inside of your copy of Winlink, when we open up the form, it opens in our browser and we can say print it as a PDF or print it right out of our printer, and we can hand it to the agency and they have the information in the form in the layout that they are expecting. There's also, with every email message, there's some amount of message overhead, some amount of data that it takes to just send a basic email. And in general, we're looking at roughly about 2 kilobytes or less of data. I just did a couple of tests and I sent our typical, like, hey, send pizza Winlink message, and I was able to check that, and it ends up being about 1.2 kilobytes of data. So a little bit smaller than this, but this is overall what we're kind of looking at when we go to send some Winlink traffic. Now, this is a lot smaller than, say, sending a PDF. So if we were to take a basic form and just convert it to a compressed PDF, we're looking at roughly about 107 kilobytes of data for that form. And that total Winlink message, if you look at all three of the copies of data plus the overall overhead, a typical Winlink message is roughly about 15 kilobytes or so in order to have that data. That's a great savings when we're trying to send traffic via the internet or via radio, where we're dealing with a very bandwidth limited sort of situation. Now, another place that Winlink really helps to make sure that we're able to transfer all of these data is there is a total file size limit of about 120 kilobytes per Winlink message. And that ensures that we're not eating up all of the bandwidth and all of the time for sending any individual message. It really kind of limits us down in a smart way because we're dealing with a shared resource of trying to send data along with every other operator that's trying to send in their data as well. So if we take a step back and we look at this from the problem of just sending a single Winlink form, we're looking at about 15 kilobytes of data. If we think of span of control and you have, say, 8 operators, that's about 120 kilobytes worth of data right there. So if you were to try and just forward each of those messages combined, we're looking at about 120 kilobytes. If you even group them together, that's kind of maxing out that one single file. What happens if you have 50 operators? Now we're talking about maybe 750 kilobytes of data or 7 separate messages that group together to be about 120 kilobytes of data each. A smarter, more efficient way to be able to deal with this is to get rid of all of the individual bits of data, such as the XML files and all that, and to group all of those together into one just plain data file. And if you do this, you can get roughly 50 messages worth of data, 50 forms worth of data into a single 120 kilobyte file. Now let's walk through and show you how you do that and how you manage and organize all of these data. So let's go ahead and move some data. Let me bring my laptop back up and we're going to walk through this process together. I'll bring myself back up on the screen so you're able to see me as well. So I'm going to close this Telnet session here. Now, there's a couple of ways, first of all, that as an operator, you're going to want to be able to deal with all of these data coming in. And the first is to figure out how you can organize the data a little bit better. And there's 2 ways that you might want to do this. If you're just using your own machine, if it's just you operating on this, there is this section called personal folders. And what you can do is you can right click into that area or control click, and you can say, I'm going to make this my my demo data folder. And you can hit update. And what that's going to do is it's going to create a new folder over here. And you can see it's called demo data folder, where you've got a place where you can organize all of your messages. Now, you might think, you know what, I want to just click on this message and I'm going to drag it over into that folder. Well, that actually doesn't work. What you want to do is you want to select the image, select the file, and of course it's going to open up open the message up here for me. But you want to select the file and you want to come up here to the top where it says move to. We'll click the little drop down here at this point, and this is a listing of all of the different folders that you have in your personal folders. And so you can see now I have that folder called demo data folder. I can select that, and then I can click the move to. And if you watch this demo data folder here right now, it has 0. I hit move to, and it moves that file over into that location. Of course, I clicked on another message and it moved it over. You can hold down, you can click on the first message, you can hold down the shift key, select multiple messages, and move those into a grouping. So this is a great way if you're having to deal with lots of these check-ins that are coming in and you want to keep everything organized, you can move them into an individual folder. But what happens if in a situation where you have multiple operators all using the same computer and you're kind of handing off from one session to another, and you want to be able to hand off all of these data to the next operator? Well, there you can use the global folders. You can click, instead of clicking and right-clicking in the main portion here, you can just click on the top heading here where it says global folders, and you get that global folders pop up. And I can say demo folder. I'm going to call this my global demo, so show you that it's a little bit different. And I'll hit OK, and it's created that global demos folder. And in the move to up here in the top, if I click that drop down, you can see now it's added that global demo folder. Now, what a global folder does is it allow all the other operators on your system to be able to access the data that's inside of that global folder. So that works really nicely as well. All right, so let's talk about the forms themselves. So you can see I've already kind of like a typical cooking show, I've gone ahead and pre-baked some of this stuff. So here's my solar storm exercise. These are the data that we got in last week. I actually got 46 messages. I don't have them all in here. But let's say I want to be able to send these data in. These are all data that have come in from all of my operators that I have on my team. So if you did your homework last week and you collected a bunch of form data from other operators, this is how you would want to send those data into us. Now, what you would do is you would click on the first message in the grouping of all of these. You can see these are all of the field situation reports that I got in. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the list. I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard, and I'm going to click on the bottom message. And what that's going to do is it's going to select all of the messages in between the top all the way down to the bottom. That's one way to make a selection to be able to get that. You could then move these into that other folder if you needed to be able to do that. But let's walk through how you submit the data. What you do is you come up and you go to the globe icon, and you make sure you have the correct report sent in. So here I've got my field situation report selected, and you can see I've got a total of 141 field situation reports that I've received. However, only about 46 of them came in the last week. So I want to make sure I can isolate just the reports that I need to send off. And there's two ways to send off data. The first is this over here, down here where you've got the generate CSV file. David's going to walk you through what that's going to look like here in just a little while. That's going to be for analyzing the data. But for moving the data from one system to another, what you're going to use is this right-hand side where it says export and import the form data. Let's walk through the export process first. I'm going to click on export, and then you can come up here at the top and you have a way to select a portion of the data. Here, I'm going to limit my start date, and I'm going to limit this to the 24th of May, which is when we did our show last week. That was on the 26th. So all of the field situation reports for this exercise have come in from the 26th until now. So I'm going to limit from that time period. Now, I could put an end time limit. So maybe I need to go back in time and I need to be able to select all of the forms that came in on day 1 of an incident. And then I want to select the data that came in on day 2 of the incident. You would be able to select a starting and an ending date and time so you could group the data into logical groupings in order to send off and analyze those. Include only reports corresponding to the markers shown on the map. This is if you've gone in and you've mapped the data, and you've seen us map the data before, and you've created different pins and you've isolated, and you're only showing specific data points in there. Dan's going to walk you through some of that in just a little while, but I'm not going to do that. I just want to make sure I get all the data and I want to send it in. Next is you want to go to this export output file. Now, a lot of us would tend to just click inside of here, just type in a name of a file. That's not going to work. What you got to do is you got to click the browse button, and then you're going to navigate on your computer. So for instance, I have on my desktop, I have a folder called data, and I've got a folder called testing. And I'm going to come down here. I've got it called field situation report, and I'm going to, at the end of that, I'm going to say live. So this is our WaveTalkers live episode. That's going to create a dedicated file. You can see it's not here. And I'm going to hit save. And now when I hit the export data button, it's going to say, hey, 47 messages just got exported. So let's go ahead and look and see what those messages are. I'm going to close this, and let me just close this window here. Let me move my Winlink over, and here's that data folder that I have on my desktop. And inside of there is my testing data folder. And here's that field situation report live.txt. And you can see that for 47 messages, for 47 Winlink forms, I now have only a 94 kilobyte file. That's great, because then I can send that one file off via Winlink. So let me show you how I do that. So instead of sending this, so I'm going to send this off to my agency, right? So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create a new message. And in the to field, I'm going to send it to my shares call sign. So I'm going to send it to November, Alpha, Niner, Charlie, Lima. And I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to say baseline data. And I'm going to come down here, and here is the data. Now, what you want to do here is you want to add an attachment. We're going to come up here. We're going to click on attachment. So if you're following along with me, send it to WaveTalkers. Don't send it to my shares call sign. Send it to WaveTalkers, and that way all of the data will come in at one time. But I just want to be able to do this so I can demonstrate in a clean setup. I'm going to hit attachments, and I'm going to hit the add button here inside of attachments. And then I'm going to navigate to that folder where I save the data from. And here I've got that field situation reports live.txt. I'll go ahead and click on that, and I'll hit the open button, and it attaches it. You can see right here that the size of that file is 95.8 kilobytes. So that's smaller than the maximum file size allowed, which means it's going to show up here in yellow. If it shows up in red, it's letting you know, hey, this file is too big. You're going to have to deal with it. Winlink is not going to send that. So this file is small enough. It's going to allow us to send. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit finished. And that file is attached. Now I'm going to go ahead and post that to my outbox. And I'm going to go ahead and send that traffic. So I'm going to hit open session, start. Now it's going to first send the message, and then it's going to go in and it's going to start downloading the rest of the check-ins that have been coming in. And so here you can see part of the problem that we're running into, because if you have a lot of messages that are coming in, suddenly I'm now having to deselect or deal with all of these other data that's coming in here. So you want to make sure you've got a clean setup to be able to deal with that. So while that's going through, it's going to download all of these messages. As soon as it finishes this first round, we'll go ahead and switch over to my shares address, and we'll import all of those messages. Now, in order for you to follow along with that, let me switch over to another machine here real quick. I'm going to switch over to this machine. If you go to wavetalkers.com right now, you go up to the main homepage for WaveTalkers, and you scroll down just a little bit. Here is the video that you're watching right now. This is the live stream that's going on. And underneath of there, there's an option that says download sample data, and there's a zip file. You can download the data that I just exported, and you're able to then follow along as you import those data along with me to see. Now, what I want to do first, though, while we're finishing those data to download, I've also included the 108 data.txt file. And the purpose of adding this is I want you to be able to see what the data looks like when it's all grouped together in one of these text documents. So I'm going to click on this text document right here. And what I've done is I've gone into this text document and I've inserted some additional line breaks in between each of the data records that's in here. Now, this is super tiny and really hard to read. Let me zoom in on the data a little bit so it's a little bit easier for you to be able to read on screen. This is the way that data comes in when it's exported in that text file format. It is actually delimited. It's saying this is the map file name. It's got the fields that are listed here. So it's the field situation report. It's got the message ID that came in, the subject that was there, the date, the time, and then all of the different fields and all of the data that's all self-contained within this one file. So it's a very condensed, very information dense file. It's not something that's necessarily human readable, but what it is machine readable. And let me show you how that works. So let me close this and we're going to go back over to my laptop. And we've gotten all of those data have downloaded now. I'm going to switch over to my shares address here. Let me just quickly switch over to that account. And now I'm going to go through. You can see that if I go here in the toolbar, if I wanted to map this and I go to pull the form down, I do not have any of those field situation reports in here. I have no field situation reports. I've got a couple of Winlink check-ins and I've got my messages. So let me go and check my mail real quick. I'm going to say open session. Go ahead and start. And if the demo gods are with me, there we go. I've gotten in my baseline data, that message that I just sent. So let me go ahead and download those. The data come in pretty quickly. I'll go ahead and close the message. And here is the message. If I go ahead and double click it, I'll open it up and all it says is here are the data. And I can see that there's an attachment. I'll say view attachment. There is that attachment. And I'm just going to do save as. And I'll put it right on my desktop so it's a little bit easier to be able to get to. And it's called the field situation report live.txt. I'll go ahead and save that. Close it and we'll close the message. Now, here's how you get those data in. So if you've downloaded the zip file off of wavetalkers.com, you want to make sure that you unzip the file. Just right click on it and say unzip, and it'll pull the text document out nice and cleanly. What you want to do is you want to then go here into the little globe icon. And this is what your agency would be doing. Or if you have a variety of different operators, maybe you've set up different teams and you want the data to go into team leaders and then have those team leaders just submit you the data that you're then going to collate and pass on to your agency. Here's how you would import those in. So what you would do is over on the right-hand side, you click on the option for import form data. And then it's going to say, where's the input file? So I'll say browse. And I'm going to navigate up to my desktop. And here's that field situation report live.txt. That's the file that we just downloaded. I'll go ahead and select that and hit open. And it's got it listed here. And I'll say import from file. It says 47 new records were just added to the field situation report form. Great. Let me hit OK. Now, when I click the drop down up here, suddenly I have a field situation report option that's here for me to look at those data. I'll hit that and then hit display map. And now I have all of the data that came in. I'll go ahead and zoom out to full global view. And your data should now look pretty similar to what my data looks like. And you're able to do all of the things that we've been talking about here. You're able to come up here and say, set the filters and come down and find which filter that you want to be able to filter on. And Dan is going to walk us through the way to begin analyzing those data. So hopefully everybody's been able to follow along thus far. You have the data that is available to you. If you did receive field situation reports, please export those out using the format that we just showed you and send those data to WaveTalkers and include the TXT file so I can import them. So we'll be able to look at the full data set after Dan gets through looking at all of this information. So Dan, let me kick it over to you and you can walk us through the next stage.
All right, Chris. So I've sort of, like Chris said, I've done the cooking show thing and pre-baked a little bit. I did a little different way of getting my data. Rather than sending it in a Winlink message, I did SneakerNet. I just put it on a flash drive and moved it from my other computer into this one. So we're all ready to go ahead and look at it. So we're going to map. Field situation reports already selected. You can see I have 51 reports. I'm going to display the map, and you can see my group of reports here. Now I'm going to use the filter feature to try to shrink that down a little bit, because I just happen to know that some of this data is from an exercise 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And so I'm going to go ahead and set my filters, and I'm going to use 500 hours, which will get me, I think, past the last exercise we did. And there we go. We've got a little bit less data to deal with. Let me bring this in a little bit here. Okay, so you can see, rather than using the data from last week's exercise, I think in most cases, emergency managers are going to be interested in more local data. What's going on in my area of jurisdiction? So we're going to take some data from an ACS, LA City ACS exercise. And you can see we've got people spread out, not evenly, but throughout the Los Angeles area. And you can see I'm the green dot here. And we've got a fairly good representation of the LA area. So for purposes of this exercise, let's say I'm sitting in the ACS radio room at the Los Angeles City EOC, and a rep from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power taps me on the shoulder, and he says, I'm on the power side, because our Department of Water and Power really is two separate companies within one heading. So I'm on the power side. Where's my power out? So I can really easily tell him that by going up here, set a filter. I can go down here and find commercial power functioning. If I come over here and set that to no, and I set that to a distinctive color, let's pick red, and I save it. Now you can see in my map, I can show him where power is out in his jurisdiction. Now, one of the cool things that they've done in more recent versions of this form is they allow you to map the comments. And so in the city of Los Angeles, we have only one power company. That's the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It's a municipally operated company. But we do have a few members that actually live in the county and work in the city. So one of these guys up here, Ken, KS3I, he reported that commercial power was where is it? Yeah, commercial power is operating. So he didn't comment on his power company. I happen to know he is Edison. So that allows me, by mapping that comments column, let's go back down here, commercial power, but there's commercial power comment. If I go in there and I put, let's just, for curiosity, let's see if anybody did put Southern California Edison, and we'll make that, let's make it something different. Let's make it purple. Okay. And looking out here, I don't see anybody in purple. Here's another one, AJ up in Santa Clarita. He works in the city, but lives in the county. So he either did power company or he worded it somewhat differently. Let's take a look at the data. Commercial power. Okay, so he called it SoCal Edison. One of the problems with mapping these fields is it maps specific wording. So one of the things you would need to do with your group is to come up with a common set of terms. If we were to go back and change that filter, And where did it go? SCE. And I think he did SoCal Edison. And my computer has frozen. Let's see if it'll map on SoCal. It's okay. So you see his pin is turned white. That means that he has answered yes to more than one question. And that, by the way, is settable down here. Color, if multiple colors are selected, you can do that white. Now, I kind of like to do that black, but that's up to you. But see now, so he's answered yes to commercial power being out and yes to being SoCal Edison. So he shows up in black. So very useful to do that. Let's try another one here. We're going to go here and clear all selections. That turns all of your answers back to the default. Let's do internet. Okay, internet functioning. Let's do brown for internet functioning, and let's change the answer to no. We go back and look at our map again, and you can see a number of people have reported that their internet is not functioning. Now, in our area, there are a couple of internet providers. So let's say the guy from Spectrum is the one tapping me on the shoulder. I can go back to my filters. I can go to that internet comment, and I can do Spectrum. And whoops, if I could only type. Okay, and then let's make that purple. We go back, do that, and nobody's turning purple. I'm surprised at that. Let's see why that happened. Most of them should be Spectrum. No. Oh, Spectrum, purple. Make it a different color, and just in case it's a.
Dan, check the spelling of Spectrum.
Oh, that could do it. Thank you. I have this on an upper screen, and it's just so damn small. Okay, now let's try it. And sure enough, we've got several people reported in black. And again, that means that they have answered 2 questions that meet our filter data. So those would all be Spectrum users. So you can see that with this form in particular, the filtering is really useful. And you can do multiple issues on a form. The other thing is any particular dot on the screen, you can double click on that and it will bring up all their answers. So if they have clicked as having no power, you can also go and look and see what else is going on. Maybe the DWP guy also wants to know about water. So you could come here and just look at the raw data and see what they've reported. That's particularly useful if there's a trend in one area that water is out in one grouping. I would imagine in an incident, probably you're going to see clusters of the same answer, phones being out or cell phones being out, all in one area. So you can see how great this filtering feature is and the mapping in general, particularly for ground truth in early stages. I mean, with ACS, I could probably in 30 minutes have a full set of data into the EOC for them to look at. And from a fairly wide area of Los Angeles. Now, if this was an actual incident, I would probably reach out to Aries and say, would you have your guys send in field situation reports, or the LA County DCS? You know, the more data, the better. So that's where we can reach out to our sister organizations and say, I really need this information. Can your guys provide this to me? And in a very short period of time, we should be able to give them a good picture of what's happening in another area. One last thing I want to talk about on this, and we sort of touched on it, but that's the additional comments field here. Now, that's a free-form field, and so I can tell my members that I want them to return a specific word pattern in answer to a question. So maybe there's something we need to know that isn't on this screen. I think I've told this story before, but we were doing a drill and I was operating Winlink at the EOC, and this was a county-wide drill. And I had a guy come in and tap me on the shoulder and said he was a ham and he was from the Department of Public Health. And so I said, well, hey, have you ever seen Winlink? No, I don't know about Winlink. And so I showed him Winlink, and I showed him how we could map the field situation report. And he just said, oh my goodness. He says, we've been looking for years for a way to get air quality reports from around the area in a fairly rapid fashion. Could you do that? And well, that isn't part of the form, but certainly if we were to tell our members and give them some direction on wording to use and how to rate the air quality, we could have them write that in that additional comments. And then we just put in here a certain word string, air, boy, this is why I pre-bake it, air quality poor. Now we probably would want something more specific, but it would go through all those reports and it would look for that word string. And if I assigned a color to it, that'd be a good one for black, wouldn't it? We'll do brown, although we've already used that. So let's change that one to green. Had people returned that word pattern, we could have a different color for air quality poor. And that makes the form really powerful beyond the limited number of questions that it already asks. And Chris, that's all I've got. So I'm going to send it back to you.
Hey, Dan, can you go back to your map here real quick? Because there's one more thing that I'd like for you to be able to show us. Go ahead and close the filters there. And there's one more bit of information that's available on these maps that it can be super helpful. And this is a nice lead in to what David's going to show us here in just a second. Up at the top where it's got the self filters, it's got zoom in, zoom out. The fourth option there is summary. Go ahead and click on summary for us. So summary allows us to see a quick snapshot of all of those data that you have displayed on your map right there. So you can quickly kind of skim down and you can see, oh, here's this that may be happening, or there's that may be happening. And so that's super helpful. Go ahead and close that now for me for a second, Dan. And then the next option is that save as PDF, save as JPEG. And what that will do is very similar to what Dan was saying, where he had an agency who said, hey, this would be really helpful for us to have some of these information. If your operator is there running Winlink, they're going through, they're helping to sort that information, and your agency says, hey, I would like to see a map of that. Can we share it out to some more operators? You can use this, set the map the way that you want to show it with the filters, and then create a JPEG, just like you do for anything else here inside of Winlink. Save the file, and then you're able to send that JPEG image either to another operator, put it on a jump drive, hand it off to the agency or what have you. But it creates a map that you can then share directly with that. So there's just a couple of ways of being able to get the data that's come in and to be able to share it. With that, let me kick it over to David. David, can you walk us through other ways that we might be able to use some of these data?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we're going to walk through just a different way to do what we just demonstrated. So here is my Winlink station, and as all good things, I want to make sure I have all the data that I can get. So I'm going to get in here and see if I have any more data, and I got a couple that are coming in. And I could just go, wait for it. I could just go right in here into the mapping and look at the maps for the field situation reports that we did. And as Chris showed you with the data that we received, I had pulled down the data and I have imported the data onto the system. But you can also export a useful CSV file from right here as well. And again, I'll show you real quick. This is the big picture of the data that we're looking at. But I can export and generate a CSV file, and I have a lot of options as far as how am I going to save it off, or the file type, and I'm going to save it as a comma separated file. You have an option to limit the dates, and I'm limiting it back a couple of years because I just want to get all the data that's on my system. And generate this as a file, and I'm going to save the file onto my system and then show you some other things that we can do with it. I'm going to generate the file. Wrote 136 records to this place where I wanted to save it. And that's great. So now what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to close this out. And, as we've been doing, because we're getting kind of late in the show, I've also preloaded some of my data. So out here, I've got the spreadsheet, and here is the data that we're looking at. These are field situation reports over that were on my machine over a period of time. There's quite a few of them here. All the data's in here in the format that we want to look at. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to jump over to the file really quick so you can see. This is the file that we saved. And if you look at it with just a plain editor like Notepad, you can see it is just a standard CSV file. Not easy to work with it in this format, but you can open these in Excel directly. And that's what I did here. This is the file that's opened up in Excel. And what I've decided I want to do with it is, rather than do a map, I might be working in USC and they want to just have an overall picture of the area that's affected right now, an overall idea of what's happening numbers wise. So what I did was I went in and generated a bunch of simple charts based on the data that we received. And most of these data around questions are yes or no or unknown. Is the power up? Is the power down? Are the phone lines up or the phone lines down? And what I did was I dumped them all into a single spreadsheet here. And it's quick and easy to do this with a pivot chart and pivot tables. I've got all these data elements, these little simple charts, cell phones functioning, plain old telephone service lines functioning, gas functioning, internet functioning, commercial power functioning, and commercial power stable. So you can see here, we've got a bunch of data. The nice thing about it is the spreadsheet, the table that's here that feeds all this, it's dynamic, that generates these charts. So if I had an updated version of this data, I could go grab the data, dump it in the spreadsheet here, and these tables would update automatically. Well, you could take this one more step further. Say I'm in that EOC and not maybe the cable guy that tapped down on the shoulder isn't the important one that wants to know what areas are out and what areas are down. Maybe the incident commander wants to know, like, where are we at in terms of things up, things down in a bigger picture, charts like this. Well, we can take this data and push this data out into a dashboard, right? This is a simple PowerPoint dashboard that I can put up on a screen somewhere. This is all of the data that you just saw on the table, live, ready to go from our network here. And you can show this up on a screen so somebody can look up and see, oh, it looks like most everything's okay. Maybe the natural gas lines aren't 61 of the total are functioning. Oh, and look, the plain old telephone service, the POTS line, are only 50 of those are functioning overall. And you can have a picture of what's going on in your community. Quick and easy. These are all dynamic. They'll update automatically as you change the data in the spreadsheet. So you can set it up so that you're automatically pulling this data down on a regular basis. And then again, as long as you pull it down into this section, this tab on the spreadsheet, all of the mini charts that go along with it will update automatically based on the data there, and they will all feed into this chart based on the chart here. And the chart is feeding this PowerPoint, so these will update in real time for you, and you can give somebody a nice picture of what's the overall picture of what we've got going on. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks a lot. So here I am. I'm back inside of my copy of Winlink, and we've had several operators who have sent in the batch of files from them. The last one that just sent one in is Logan, KD6LLB. And I would just want to walk through this process just one more time so people can see how you pull these files in completely. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this message from Logan, and it opens it up. And he said that, hey, here are their field situation reports. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to where it says view attachments. I'll click on view attachments, and here is his field situation report. And there it's 117.1 kilobytes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click save as. And I'm going to save that. And instead of having it called field situation report, I'm going to call it the Logan file field situation report, because I've already saved this one time. I'll go ahead and hit save. And now that file is now saved into my data folder along with all the other ones. We got one in from King in Texas. We got one in from Hawaii. Scott sent some in as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and import that data file from Logan. I'll click on the map. Right now I've got 149 in here. Let me go ahead and import form data. I'm going to click the browse button, and I'm going to go find that Logan file field situation report. I'll give that a double click. Import the file. 11 more records were just added, so we should see, yep, our field situation report just incremented to 160 records have just come in. Now I'll hit display map, and I'm going to go ahead and blow this out to full screen so we can see there's more field situation reports that came in from out here in Hawaii. Bill sent those in. We have a couple of extra reports that came in here in Texas where King had sent those in. And there's a few more that are up here in the Piedmont area. Let me go ahead and zoom in on Southern California just a little bit. And we can see that Logan's group sent in a whole bunch of these field situation reports as well. So we have a whole bunch more data to be able to work with in this format. This is a great way to be able to batch these data together. So now let's say I need to send all of these data together up to our agency. Well, all I do is I come back here into that map CSV file. I'm going to come over on the right-hand side to the export and import form data. I'll export the form data. I'll make sure that my date range is set appropriately in here. Make sure that is checked. I'm going to browse, and I'm going to name this file the final field situation reports. I'm going to hit the save button and export those data. 65 records were sent out. Then I could take that file, attach it, send it on to the agency, and they would have all of the data when they import it into Winlink. If they wanted to, they could use the mapping features in Winlink, or as David just showed, they could export that file out as a CSV file and import it into other data systems as need be. So I hope that gives folks a good sense of how you're able to work with this. If you haven't had a chance to send in your field situation report, please go ahead and do that. If you have just an individual one, you can go ahead and send that to WaveTalkers, and we'll get that. If you have sent in your Winlink check-in, go ahead and send that in now if you haven't had a chance to do that. I'll do one more quick check to see that we got all of those field situation reports and all of those check-ins in. It looks like there are a few more coming in, so I'll go ahead and download those, and then we'll get one more round of those, make sure that we got everybody's check-in so we can build up a map and see where everybody is coming in from today. Looks like we've gotten them all at this point. So go ahead and close that, and let's go ahead and click that map icon. I'm going to change from the selected of the field situation report. I'm going to go down to the Winlink check-in V5 so we can look at all of the Winlink check-ins that have come in. I'll go ahead and display that map. It looks like I don't have the filter turned on. This would be all of the field situation reports that have come in, or all of the Winlink check-ins that have come in. Let's go ahead and limit that. We're going to limit that to the past 24 hours. So we'll just see all of the ones for this episode. There we go. There are those. Let's go ahead and view that out to zoom all the way out. and we'll right click and zoom over. Now we should be able to look at the ones that folks who have checked in. It looks like we've got Bill KH6 uniform out there in Hawaii. Aloha to you, Bill, and thanks a lot for sending in that batch of field situation reports from your operators. It looks like we also have Terry down in New Zealand. This is ZL1HOG. Terry sent out a request to a bunch of other operators in New Zealand. They sent them in one by one throughout the week, so there were some of those that came in. Here is an operator. This is Victor Kilo 2 Sierra Kilo Yankee from the Sydney area. Thanks a lot for checking in today. We also have Sierra Mike 7 Yankee Tango November. They're in Sweden, and Roland Delta Golf 1 Golf Hotel Radio. Let me go ahead and zoom into North America. You can also see some of these pins in here are purple. Those are
Chris,
operators who have sent in their Winlink check-in.
Chris, before you do that, you've got one down at the very tip of South America.
I do?
I thought there was one there.
Don't see them.
Never mind.
All right, let's zoom back in.
Oh, I know what it was.
It's an artifact. It's an artifact from the back of your green screen.
Oh, sorry. Zoom in a little bit more. So here's those check-ins that are coming in. We've got some operators that are here are pinned up in a color. If I click on this, we can see that those operators have sent in via VHF or VARA FM. If I change those drop downs here to be VARA HF and HF, we should be able to see the operators who have sent in their check-ins via HF. And there they go. So those highlight up there nicely. I'll go ahead and roll over all of these check-ins so folks can see that we did, in fact, receive your check-ins. Looks like we've got quite a few more up there from our friends in Canada up there north of the border. So thanks a lot for joining us up there. There's a couple of operators here in Alabama area, or in Georgia. Here is our friend, Mr. Waterman, joining us from Tennessee. Several operators down here in Texas, quite a few more than we've normally seen. So thanks a lot for joining us down there. Here in the middle of the country, we'll roll over many more of those pins, make sure we're able to see everybody who has been able to send in their Winlink check-ins. And here we are down on the Pacific Northwest. I know there's a lot of operators that are out there at PacificCon right now that's going in the Pacific Northwest. Great show that's going on right now. Let me go and zoom into the Southern California region, pan over for that. We've got a big cluster of folks down in here. I'll just move over each of those. There's Logan. Thanks a lot for sending in that those files, Logan. It's great to see all of those check-ins come in as well. So there we go. If you enjoy what we're doing, if you find any of this information helpful, be sure to go onto our YouTube channel and like the video. Leave us a comment. Let us know if there's something in particular that you learned in this particular episode. If you really find the information helpful, consider going on to wavetalkers.com and use the Buy Us a Coffee link. It really helps us keep the show going and keeps us to afford all of the infrastructure that it takes to run all of this stuff. So let me bring the guys back up and we'll go around and we'll do our final wrap up here before we stick a pin in this one for the week. And we'll go ahead and zoom back up into the booth. There we are. And David, any closing thoughts from you today? Great walkthrough of those data.
Yeah, thanks much. So, data is an important thing. This is one of those areas where as events are coming together, having a team of skilled Winlink operators can really provide situational awareness over a small or a very vast area. So, getting your team together, getting people to understand how to file these reports and other reports can really very, very quickly add to the knowledge base about what's going on in your community, including the fact that, hey, there's a certain area that's not reporting. Well, I wonder why. Maybe there's something going on there. So get with your teams, get folks used to sending these reports, teach them how to map it, because it may not be those regular folks that are doing the maps all the time. It may be one of those, other operators that will have to step up in time of need. Maybe I would be affected. I can't generate the reports, but somebody else in my neighborhood could, or someone else that I've taught these skills would be able to step up and provide it. And again, as we showed, maps are very useful. Dan showed a great way to be able to pinpoint an areas up and down, but there are other data elements that are important, like what's the overall picture look like? And so you can take that data and show a bunch of different ways of doing this.
Thanks a lot, David. Dan, NR6V.
Well, I think as boring as data can be, it's so important in what we do, and showing a few different ways we can use that data. The beauty of Winlink, or one of the beauties of Winlink, is it makes it pretty easy. And, this is where you leverage people in your group that have particular skills. One of the groups I'm in, we've got a cartographer. That's pretty cool. We've got IT people, and I think we've got a GIS person that does this stuff all the time. So leverage those folks. I really liked what David showed. I'd love to learn exactly how you do that, because I think coming up with where we work at the EOC, though, there's a whole wall of huge monitors. And I'm willing to bet that they would be interested in posting something on one of those monitors to have an overall picture. So I've seen a few really neat dashboards that were created around the country. And, what David showed was what appears to be a really simple way to do that. So I'd like to learn more about that.
Thank you, Dan. Scott, Kim6RFB, what was going on in the chat on the various different platforms?
Well, good question, and a lot of good comments. People checking in from Sweden, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Sydney, Australia. Great to have everybody there, and great information. And this is a really great way to track information. In this day and age, as both David and Dan said, information is key. To be able to run an incident correctly, having the information available and in the right format at the right time can really make or break the success of an incident real quick.
Thank you very much. And we do have one other person that I would like to bring up. And Greg, I see you're here in the Zoom with us. I was wondering if you'd be able to turn your camera on for a second so that folks can give you a little bow here. I'd like to bring you up if that's okay with you. So for those of you who don't know, Greg is the member of the Winlink development team who manages all of the forms.
Hey,
and I just had him for a second and he just disappeared on me. Where'd he go? There he is. He's putting his little headset on. There we go. Let me go ahead and add a spotlight for him and make it so that he is able to unmute himself if he wants to say anything. There we go. Now he is should be able to unmute himself. So Greg is the one who builds all of these forms and makes all of this magic happen in the background. So I wanted to give a big nod to you for all of the hard work that you have put in. This is the guy behind all of this magic that happens in the background. So anything you want to say to us or everyone out there, Greg?
Well, I think the forms are very valuable. Phil does all the hard work within Winlink. I can only work within the forums and what code I can add. But yeah, it's valuable stuff. And Dan in our 6B, if you have an air quality form, that could always be created. You get an official form we can build from.
We'll do. We'll talk to the folks at Public Health.
Yeah. Working on a form for someone in the East Coast for blood availability, how many units of each cut type they have. So
that'd probably be universal.
You would hope.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, hey, thanks a lot, Greg, for all you do and everyone else there on the Winlink development team. We really appreciate it. And if you're here inside of the Zoom with our live audience, hang around. We'll go into the after party right after this. We'll open up the mics and take some questions. If you're joining us on YouTube, LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, any of the other different platforms, thanks a lot for joining us. We'll see you all next week, and 7-3 to all of you.